leadership that he was showing. As far as Newt goes, I think the governor was very effective in pointing out a couple of things. Number one, he pointed out that, or he called him out for being reluctant to repeat the criticisms that he's been making of Mitt on the stage. He called him out for traveling from state to state, promising court to different parts of the country. He called him out for criticizing him for owning investments that are similar to investments that Newt himself owns.
Why do you think Newt didn't go more on the attack than Romney?
I thought he did go on the attack. You know, I thought he tried to make his case against Mitt Romney, but he looked deflated to me.
What did you think of Senator Santorum's performance? Were you surprised?
If Senator Santorum had all these problems with the Massachusetts healthcare law, it would have been helpful if he had made those objections known back in 2008 when he endorsed Mitt Romney. He didn't. Instead, he called Mitt Romney a good conservative. And I think his change of opinion has to do with politics and the fact that he's now running against Mitt Romney.
Does Governor Romney not actually approve the ads where he endorses the ads?
Well, we've had, I think, about 85 campaign videos, TV ads, and radio ads that have been up and running in different states. He doesn't recall all of them. That particular ad is a radio ad. It was rated, by the way, by PolitiFact as mostly true. Newt Gingrich did, in fact, refer to Spanish as the language of the ghetto. And I know he says it was taken out of context, but when he apologized for it in a web video, he apologized in Spanish.
Eric, was the Romney campaign involved in getting supporters to the audience tonight? Did you guys stock the crowd tonight with supporters?
Yes, I invited both my parents. They were here. They live in the Jacksonville area.
Who else?
Those are the only two that I invited.
What about the campaign?
Pardon?
What about the campaign?
The campaign was given an allotment of tickets. I don't know how many tickets they received. I assume it's the same as every other campaign.
Why do you think Gingrich seemed deflated tonight? What's changed in the last section, if anything?
I think you all know Speaker Gingrich pretty well. He's an erratic personality. He bounces around from pillar to post. I think over the last 24 hours, he's become more and more unhinged. And I think that was clearly evident at tonight's debate.
How much debate prep did Governor Romney do? He seemed to have a stronger performance tonight than in the past with more answers on
Well, I guess maybe the 18th debate, I think. 19th. The 19th debate. Most of the early prepping happens before the first couple of debates. And then afterwards, it's just tune-up. And so we tune up, and the way we tune up is we sit around a conference table. There's a group of senior advisors that talk with the governor about current headlines, topics that we expect will come up and be covered. But it's not extensive. We don't do mock debates where we have fill-ins for the other candidates. It's very informal and casual.
and Brett O'Donnell. I mean, what role? I mean, he's new to the team, right? So what role has he been playing?
We've been in touch with Brett ever since the Iowa campaign, following Michelle Bachmann's departure from the race, and he's been giving us advice since that time.
But we have seen something, a new, more combative Mr. Romney tonight. What brought that on?
I think campaigns have their own rhythms. Obviously, we're here in Florida. The contest got tighter after South Carolina, and so naturally you're seeing more and sharper contrasts between Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich. Some of those contrasts are being drawn by Mitt Romney. Other contrasts are being drawn by Newt Gingrich. But that's just the nature of a campaign.
But in terms of the strategy, do you think the more combative, harder-hitting attack method is going to serve Mr. Romney well going forward?
I think both candidates, all four candidates, would like to win, in whatever state they're competing. So sure, there's going to be some sharp contrast drawn on the issues. But this contest doesn't end with Florida. It goes on after Florida. It'll go on for many months. There won't be a nominee until someone gets approximately 1,144 delegates. That'll happen sometime in the late spring, I imagine. So the nomination process doesn't end on the 31st of January. It keeps going. The one thing I can say about Mitt Romney is we feel we have a candidate who has the stamina and the strongest organization to be able to go the distance.
Eric, how do you really support Mitt Romney with all the ads that he does? Does he look at every one of them? Does he really approve all of them?
Yeah, well, there's a disclaimer on every ad that he approves. And we've produced something like 85 web videos, radio ads, and TV ads. He can't remember all of them, but in this particular case, there was a radio ad. It was a response to the anti-immigrant attack that Newt Gingrich made against Mitt Romney. And it was rated by PolitiFact as mostly true.
So he does look at each one of them, go over them himself.
Yes, he approves them all, even if he can't recall it.
Eric, how would you describe the difference between Governor Romney's comfort level performance, however you want to put it, in the debates in South Carolina, the early debates, and the debates here? There seemed to be something different going on.
No, I disagree. I think it's the same Mitt Romney. I mean, he's someone pointed out it was the 19th debate of this campaign season. 4 years ago, he debated 13 times. That's a lot of presidential level debates. Before that, he debated 5 times in his governor's race, twice against Ted Kennedy in '94. So he's had a lot of practice at
Why do you
debating.
think he is being seen as doing a better job here than what we saw, say, in South Carolina?
Well, again, I think the race has become a sharper contrast between him and Newt Gingrich. And in Newt Gingrich, you have a person who has spent almost his entire career inside Washington. He likes to fancy himself an anti-establishment candidate or an anti-Washington candidate. But look, we're talking about the former Speaker of the House, who, following his career in Congress, opened up an influence peddling firm on K Street. And you can't change the culture of Washington if your livelihood is dependent on that same culture. Mitt Romney comes from outside Washington. He's never served down there. Almost his entire career has been in the private sector. They're two very different people. Newt Gingrich had his opportunity to change Washington, and he failed. In fact, he resigned and left Washington and then started lobbying. He doesn't like to call it lobbying, maybe it's advocacy or whatever, but he was connecting his clients with high-level contacts in government. You can call it lobbying, you can call it advocacy. It's definitely influence peddling. And he did it on behalf of Freddie Mac, and he's done it on behalf of other clients.
Hasn't Mitt Romney hired lobbyists over the years to advance his interests in Washington? Governor of Massachusetts, running game.
Mitt Romney thinks it would be a mistake for the Republican Party to nominate as their candidate against Barack Obama a lobbyist. So it's a lot different from hiring a lobbyist or having dinner with a lobbyist. Actually nominating someone who has been a lobbyist would be a departure from tradition for the Republican
Can I
Party.
ask you a quick question? Governor Romney, he just spoke earlier tonight when he said that he had only voted for a Democrat when there wasn't a Republican on the ballot. He voted for Paul Songas back in, 1992 in a primary. Weren't there other Republicans on the ballot? Could he have chosen to vote for a Republican in that primary as opposed to voting for Paul Songas? Can you speak there?
This was 1992, before Mitt Romney had begun made his first run for political office. Under the law in Massachusetts, independents, people who are unenrolled, which Governor Romney was at the time, can go into either party primary and vote. There wasn't much of a contest on the Republican side. It was an incumbent president running against Pat Buchanan. And by the the time Super Tuesday rolled around, there really wasn't much of a contest at all. So as an independent, he exercised his right to go into the Democratic primary, where he voted against Bill Clinton. In fact, he had the opportunity that year to vote against Bill Clinton twice in the primary and then in the general election when he ran against President Bush.
Well, you must feel good about the way he performed tonight. This debate, a lot of people are saying, was his strongest.
Look,
Do you feel that way?
I think he had a good debate. I think the crowd responded to his passion, into the leadership that he showed.
Were you trying to get him to rev that up?
Well, I think the contrast between him and Newt Gingrich are pretty clear. And I don't think the Republican Party is looking for a Washington insider, somebody who comes from inside Washington, who has spent his entire career there, whose livelihood is dependent on Washington to be the nominee of their party. You think they're looking for somebody who's come from outside Washington, who has spent almost the entirety of his career in the private sector. That would be
Did you
Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Good talking to you.
Did you rehearse the line about the state-by-state pandering?
Yeah, well, for those of you who have been following the race, I mean, you can go with Newt Gingrich from state to state. When he was in New Hampshire, he was promising a new VA hospital, even though there's one in Boston just an hour's drive away. When he was in South Carolina, he was promising a new interstate highway. When he was out in Iowa, he was practically drinking ethanol. Down in here in Florida, he's promising improvements in the port of Jacksonville and potentially $1 trillion space colonization program. This is the type of port mentality that caused us to lose our AAA credit rating and has created so much financial heartache for the nation. And he's not running. This isn't a contest for national congressmen or the congressman in chief. This is a contest to nominate the person that this party wants to put forward as their candidate against Barack Obama for president.
Eric, after the debate, some people were pointing to this Boston Globe report about whether or not the investments that included Fannie and Freddie were really blind. What's the story?
Yeah, I've seen that Globe story. The Globe story is wrong. The governor's Fannie and Freddie investments were in blind trusts. There were two. One of the trusts was not necessarily blind. It was a charitable remainder trust that was managed by an independent trustee, not managed by Mitt Romney.
But it was blind to the governor. He couldn't have looked at it if he.
It was not managed by the governor. He did not select the investments. He's not a beneficiary.
But is that different from the actual blind trust where he really can't look at it?
And then there was a second. Investment in his IRA, which was blind, also managed by a trustee. But let me say something about Fannie and Freddie. You can't buy a money market mutual fund in this country that doesn't contain some mortgage securities that are guaranteed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. It's nearly impossible. And I thought Governor Romney very effectively pointed that out tonight by revealing details of Newt Gingrich's own personal financial disclosure, which contains some of these very same investments that he criticizes Mitt Romney for.